Beacon Valley Literacy. I help parents help kids with reading difficulties. And tonight I have my good friend Kim on. She's an awesome parent. She's an advocate. She's an occupational therapist. And she is my tried and true ride and die chick. I go to her when I need help. I go to her when I have questions. I go to her professionally. So, Kim, do you want to say anything or introduce yourself some more?
No, you did a good job.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So basically, our goal is just to empower parents and to let them know that, they can have their questions answered by professionals like us. What led you into working as an advocate?
So my career in special education started 23 years ago when I became an occupational therapist and I started working in a school district. And about 10 years into that, then we had children, and my children all had different levels of special needs. And I was working in a district that was wonderful, and I was living in a district that was very challenging to deal with. And to get my children the supports that they needed was very hard. As a mom, it was extremely hard. As a professional, it was extremely frustrating because I knew what was right, but I couldn't get that done. And so I decided that I needed to get more training and completed the SEAT training for advocates through COPA. And that's how I got started.
I professionally, I'm so lucky to have you when we work together because you always kind of see the big picture. You look at these kids and you can see, because you're a parent and an advocate and an occupational therapist, where their course of development is going to go. And I think you've always had some of the strongest recommendations and some of the strongest help, both for me personally, when I call you in the middle of the night and say, oh my God, what do I do? And professionally, when I'm like, the pieces don't line up.
Mhm.
It's
Well,
different when you're a parent.
it is different when you're a parent. And for me as a parent, I had and this is kind of how you and I really connected,
Mhm.
was my middle son really, really was struggling. And I couldn't put my finger on it. And the school was really challenging. And me as an advocate hired an advocate to go to my meetings with me. And I would come out of those meetings and like feel like my head was spinning, like I was in a different world. I consulted with attorneys and they told me that no, I probably wouldn't get anywhere. And then I said, this is wrong. And that was when I asked for the IE. And then you got involved with my son and figured out the pieces. And for me, my goal and my mission is to make sure that kids aren't in 11th grade when we figure out, or sophomore year, when we figure out the pieces.
The pieces are challenging and they impact a lot overall, especially when they get to high school. The IEE is an independent educational evaluation, and we did one for reading.
Yes,
And I think at that moment, it kind of like really turned the corner for
it
you
did.
guys.
It did. And it allowed us to get the appropriate programming and the appropriate intervention so that he could make growth and he could realize that it wasn't all on him.
It's just
And
amazing that not only do you do it for your own child, you actually want to do it for other people.
absolutely, it's impossible not to.
It's just, you're just so good at it and personable and funny. It's just
And
amazing to have a parent in your corner.
thanks.
I always wonder, and I know we've talked about this, so this is kind of like a phony question because I've asked you 1,000 times. What do occupational therapists see in kids that struggle with reading? Like, are there telltale signs early on, the problems that linger? Like, what is help?
Mhm.
Help me.
So usually what happens is I'll get the call and they'll say they can't hold a crayon or they can't hold a pencil or they don't know their letters or they can't write their letters. They're having trouble doing that. So in my world, when I start to look at those the handwriting is the end outcome, but there's all these other pieces that go into being able to do that. And so my kids that struggle with reading are typically my kids that might have some visual perceptual issues. So what they're seeing isn't necessarily being processed appropriately by their brain, or their vision isn't accurately working for them, or neurologically there's a motor delay that they're struggling with that is preventing them from getting there, getting those pieces to all come together.
Right. Now, I feel like this probably leads into it. Are there basic truths about planning and program planning and education for these kids, from your opinion, both as your experience with your son and like what we go through? Is there like, I don't know, that tried and true recommendation, something?
I think it really depends on each kid. It really does. Like right now, I have an OT student from a college and we're doing a couple of different evals, and we've got kids with some very similar profiles, but very different reasons that those profiles look that way. So you have to specifically look at each kiddo and what they need, not just this is the square peg that the round hole, you're the square peg that has to fit in the round hole. There are so many times that I sit at meetings and I'm like, well, do we really have to do it that way? Maybe
Mhm.
we could try this, or could we try it that way? Or I think sometimes we have to think outside of the box too. And that's what makes things effective for kids.
I just feel like having an advocate like you in my corner or parents' corners, and even as a professional, is just the best way to go because it is so confusing.
And I think parents get nervous. Those meetings and those talking to teachers and talking to principals and talking to administrators and these professionals that sit around a table is very overwhelming. It
Well,
is
even like
extremely
what the data means, like you and I talk about all the time, like what does this testing data mean? And it
right.
means something different for each child. And each test, when you add them together or you put them together, you get this like mixed learning profile.
Yep.
I think
Well,
overall, I mean, it's just you need. I hate to say it, 9 times out of 10, you need a good reading evaluation and you need an advocate on your side
mhm.
because you're talking about a lifetime for your child. You're talking about producing a competent human being that's gonna be happy.
And if you spend as much time as is spent every single day for students on reading, that intervention needs to be effective for them.
Mhm.
Spending an hour and a half a day on reading, but it not being appropriately the appropriate intervention doesn't bring out good data. That just brings out frustration, behavior, mood, like
Yeah.
you're frustrated, their kids are upset. Like it brings, dinner time at home gets ugly sometimes
Tell me
when those
about it.
things,
Or
when those
tears, the tears and the sadness.
yes, and it's not good. And the kids a lot of times will hold it together, and then come home and you know, it's
Mhm.
just not fun.
It isn't. And I just feel like if you had anything to say to parents being on the other end of this, like it's so funny because your middle child is a high schooler
Mhm.
and my son is in second grade and we're following like a similar path.
You are. Yep.
So like what advice would you want parents to know as an advocate, as a parent, as an occupational therapist?
Ask questions. Don't be afraid to say, explain that to me in a way that I can understand it. We, as professionals sitting around a table, we have lots of jargon that we use. We spew out all these numbers and standard scores and this and that and raw score. And parents go, is that good or bad?
Right.
That's the reality. So and where's the progress? And I think one of the biggest things that we miss is asking for data and show me that there's progress happening. Because if we only talk once a quarter or every time your report card comes out, that's a lot of time for something to not be working. And if something is going that long and it's not working, the data should tell you that it's not working and it's time to make a change. So don't be afraid to say, I need you to explain that to me better.
Right. I think that's excellent, excellent advice. And I mean, this is a side. I was planning on ending our conversation there, but you and I laugh all the time because we come up with these great ideas and we come up with these great plans. And we've had your son and my son be like, so what? I don't care about your program. Like
Mm-hmm.
the data and the programs that we plan and these IEPs, if you don't look at the child
Right.
and see how they're responding to it, ask them if they like it.
Mm-hmm.
And then what results do you get, right?
Right. Right. One of the evals that I do for the assistive technology looks at handwriting, it looks at typing, and it looks at voice output. And one of the biggest questions for that whole eval is, hey, how'd you feel about that writing part? Or hey, how'd you feel about that typing part? Or how'd you feel about that voice to text? Because everyone thinks, oh, just give them a computer and let them talk into it and it's all good. And unless a child has buy-in, they're never going to use the tools. So
It's
I
true.
think that's the same with a reading intervention or a math intervention or anything that I do with them. You know, if I say, hey, here's a pencil grip, you're going to say, yeah, no, thank you.
Right.
Done. Unless they see the buy-in. They get, if I can get buy-in.
Mhm. Kim, I cannot thank you enough for meeting with me tonight. You
For
are,
having me.
I know, it's probably unprofessional. I love you so much. And I think you're like one of the most intelligent, genuine people out there.
You're gonna
So
make me
people, I know, I'm going to drop your contact information in the description on our YouTube post, and people can contact you. Could they contact you for an assistive tech eval?
Not, I don't do a full assistive tech eval. I do kind of a screening. I've dabbled a lot, but I'm
So,
not a teacher.
so you can do advocacy.
Yes.
You can do a screener, assistive tech eval
Yep.
screener,
Yep.
to rule out, that would be to rule out whether or not your child needs assistive tech to close the gap.
Yeah. And a lot of times our kids with reading deficits, they really do well with technology. And so the technology can do so many different things for them, depending on what we need them to accomplish during the day. It's all about accessibility.
It's just like you have such a big mixed bag of tricks. Like, tell us what we could reach out to you for.
Okay, so you can reach out to me for advocacy. You can reach out to me if you just have questions. I'd be happy to answer questions. I've been doing this a really long time, so I love to share my info. And when there's kiddos that are struggling, that really bothers me. And so I'm lucky enough to work somewhere where I can advocate for the kids on my end. Um, and you know, parents, just know that there are people out there that can help you. So reach out. OT advocacy. I have lots of friends in different places, so I lots of resources.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Melissa.
I appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.